thank you for joining us this evening. We are very pleased to have Patricia Selbert, a local author, to come and read for us from her new novel, The House of Six Doors. Patricia and her husband, Jim, and her two sons have been longtime Santa Barbara residents, and we've had the pleasure of knowing them as family friends for many, many, many years. The event tonight is co-sponsored by the Department of Sociology and Anthropology and by the Office of Intercultural Programs. And so we're very excited to have Patricia come and talk about this wonderful book that tells the story of developing an identity across many cultures and many languages, as well as negotiating family relationships that are at times supportive, at other times entangled and need to be detangled. But we're very, very happy to have you here, Patricia. And I'm almost done with the book, and it's a wonderful book. So I highly recommend it, and I believe that there are copies out on the table if you would like to purchase them afterwards. Thank you, Patricia.
Thank you, Laura, for that wonderful introduction. Bonochi, bonochi. Bombini. Masha danki babini awenochi. Imite masha contento. Ditaki turbosnang. That was papiamento. And I said, good evening, welcome, and thank you for being here. I'm very happy to be here tonight. Een hartelijk dank aan Laura Montgomery en de afdelingen van de sociologie en de antropologie en het kantoor van de interculturele programma's voor de uitnodiging om hier te komen spreken vanavond. That's Dutch. And it is a thank you, a heartfelt thank you to Laura Montgomery, to the Department of Sociology and Anthropology, and the Offices of Intercultural Programs for inviting me to speak here tonight. Esta noche hablaré sobre la influencia de 4 culturas que tuvieron sobre mi identidad y leeré unos pasajes de mi libro en relación con esos temas de la Casa de Seis Puertas, mi libro La Casa de Seis Puertas. That was Spanish, and that was that I will be speaking about the influence of 4 cultures on my identity, and I will be reading 4 short excerpts regarding that in relationship to that of my book. My name is Patricia Selbert, and I was born in Venezuela, the jungles of Venezuela. My father is Dutch from Amsterdam. My mother is Dutch from Curacao, a small Dutch island in the Caribbean, close to the coast of Venezuela. I was raised in Curacao and spent a couple of years in Colombia. Let's see. The native language of Curacao is Papiamento, which you heard in the beginning. And it is made up of 7 different languages, primarily Portuguese and West African. The grammar is West African. Curacao was a trading post in the 1600s. And many of the ships from Europe that went to get slaves in Africa came to trade them in Curacao before coming to the Americas, South and North America. So Curacao has been a multicultural society for many years, many different languages, many different customs. The House of Six Doors is about a young girl that comes with her mother and sister to America. The mother is wanting to achieve, wanting to be accepted, wanting to show that she is worthy. And she wants her children to do really well, exceptionally well. And she is a go-getter. America was the next place they were going to be. The young Serena, 13 at the time, comes to America, and she leaves behind the 3 cultures she's familiar with, living in Curacao and having traveled. And her grandmother Now, Serena's mother is multiracial, Arawak Indian, black, darker skinned, and the bit of Jewish, many different cultures, because that's what happens in Curacao. People are, they're intermixed. So this first passage I'll be reading is when Serena and her mother and her sister first arriving in Hollywood, and they run out of money, and they can't afford a hotel any longer. We went back to Hollywood and parked on Wilcox Avenue, a couple of blocks south of Sunset Boulevard, and started to set up the car for the evening. Hendrika took a couple of cans of beans out of the trunk. That was going to be our dinner. After we'd eaten, Hendrika studied the classified ads in the newspaper she had bought. See here, Mama? You can earn $20 a night for dancing. I'm not sure what go-go dancing is, but we could learn. That way we could earn money. I thought we were going to be earning money acting, I said, surprised. Hendrika thought for a moment and then said, we might not get a job right away. Remember, Elvira has only had 3 parts as an extra in 4 years. I thought it was brave of Hendrika to offer to dance. She was the only one in our family that had not inherited the rhythm of the islands. I stared out the window and at the parked cars. The street was deserted, except for a police car passing by. Mama took the paper from Hendrika and said, let me see that. Where is that? Here, there it is. The Pussycat Go-Go Club on Highland and 3rd? Let's keep that in case we need it. Hendrika folded up the newspaper and put it in the glove compartment. 2 hours later, as it was getting dark, a police car came by, but this time it stopped and the policeman walked over to our car. Are you waiting for someone? How long are you going to be here? The officer was tall and thin with blue eyes. We're spending the night here, officer, Mama said innocently. Oh, no, you're not. It's against the law to sleep in your car parked on a public street. He sounded as though he were quoting a rule book. Against the law? Why? I don't understand. If you want to spend the night in your car, you have to park on private property, at a campground, or at a designated sleeping area. You cannot park on the street and sleep in your car. I'll have to ask you to move on. Once again, Mama was exasperated by the laws of this country, which didn't allow her to live her life the way she wanted to. If I drive by here again and you're still parked here, I will have to give you a ticket. Have a good evening. The officer turned around and got back in his patrol car. I know, that cannot be. How is it possible? How can you not park on a street? St. Anthony, what are you doing to me? Why are you punishing me like this? All I ask for is a little rest and you send the policeman to chase me? Why me? Mama fell silent for a moment. That policeman must not like foreigners. Maybe he thinks we're lower class. That's why he treated us that way. St. Anthony, where are you when I need you? Her pleas filled the car and were quickly swallowed up by the night around us. Hendrika started the car slowly. We drove off to nowhere. Our gas gauge was on empty as we pulled up to a mobile station on Highland and Sunset at 2 o'clock in the morning. A tall man, dark and slim with kind brown eyes and a narrow face, came out to help us. Hey, you ladies are out late tonight. What can I do for you? He said with a heavy Spanish accent and a sweet smile. We need $2 worth of gas, please, Hendrika answered. She eyed the man and asked him where he was from. Peru. What about you? We're from Curacao. My name is Ramon Rodriguez. Para servirles. I'm Hendrika. This is my mother, Señora Gabriela Ferreira Garcia, and this is my sister, Serena. Ramon offered his hand through the window and Hendrika shook it. Mama didn't waste a moment. Without any hesitation, she asked if she could park our car at the gas station until morning. Ramon looked unsure, and then said with a slightly worried expression, "Ay, señora, I don't know. If it were my place, I would say, of course you could. But let me ask my boss. He's inside." It was nice that for a change, someone was treating us with courtesy and respect. It felt as if we were being cloaked in a soft, warm blanket. Ramon finished pumping the gas and went into the office to talk to his boss. He came back with a smile on his face. "You can park right there, next to the bathroom, but you have to leave by 6:30 in the morning." "Wonderful, thank you. St. Anthony will bless you. This is a good deed you're doing. You will see good things come to you. Thank you so very much," Mama said, leaning over Hendrika, trying to get closer to Ramon to ensure she got across her message of gratitude. At 6 that next morning, Hendrika went to the office to get the key to the restroom. Inside, there was a mild smell of urine disguised by a strong scent of Lysol. I tried not to touch the sink. As I brushed my teeth, I held my clothes under my arm and I changed my underwear and pants. I struggled, trying not to touch the floor. I could almost see the germs on the walls. Ramon came out to say goodbye before we finished his shift. Mama quickly asked, "Do you think we can park here again tonight?" Now, coming to a new country, the one thing Mama, Hendrika, and Serena had in common with Ramon was the language. And the language was not only a bridge, but it was a bond for both Ramon and for Mama and the girls. Even though they were Dutch and they were completely from different countries, the landscape of Curacao has nothing to do with Peru. The culture, the food actually is quite different, but there was a language that united them. And they were having the language in common they would have more likelihood of helping each other than not having the language in common, than not having anything in common. The next piece I chose gives an insight on the language of Papiamentu, which, again, is a language made up of many different languages. Serena is in California, remembering being with her grandmother as a 6-year-old. So this would be in the early 60s in Curacao. "I had come to help Oma make kala, fried balls made up of ground peeled black-eyed peas and hot peppers, a great delicacy in Curacao because of its intense labor intensiveness, preparation, and its fiery taste. Oma stood at the patio table. This was where she did most of her preparations for special meals. The table was big enough to seat 3 or 4 helpers. We took turns with handfuls of soaked black peas, carefully rubbing off the skins and dropping the now perfectly blonde peas one by one into a bowl next to the pot. People are like black-eyed peas, Oma said. Under their skin, they are all pure and unblemished. I asked my grandmother why Shonlulu, our housekeeper, was not helping us. Shonlulu su culpa no tabong, my grandmother answered in Papiamentu. Shonlulu's body did not feel well. In Papiamentu, one refers to the body as a separate part of one's total being. I asked what was wrong with her body, and Oma sighed. She went to Tambu again last night. Do you not like Tambu, Oma? I had never quite understood the mystery behind Tambu. Midushi, it's not that I don't like it. It's a very old tradition. In the slave days, Tambu was used to call the rains and to ask spirits for a prosperous year. It was also a way for the slave to protest their circumstances in a way that the slave owners would not understand. Nowadays, it's used to wash away the bad luck of the old year and assure good luck for the incoming year. That's why it's only done between October and February. The dancing, drumming, and chanting are all very powerful. She took another handful of peas from the bowl and continued. Slave owners thought it was the behavior of savages, and it frightened them, so they forbade it. Because of that, tambu was held secretly. But curiosity brought people of all colors to tambu. Oma stopped for a moment and looked at me. Shon Lulu likes to attend tambu, but when she goes, Shon Lulu likes to attend tambu, but when she goes, she wants to have a good time, and she drinks too much. She thinks she's enjoying herself, but her soul tells her body this is kind of entertainment is not good for her. Oma took another hand of peas. Have you ever been to tambu, Oma? I asked. Of course, Dushi. It can be a wonderful release. A good tambu can bring about all kinds of changes. She looked across the table, clearly wondering if anything she had said made sense to me. I heard faraway church bells ring noon. After the bells stopped, the kitchen radio announced, Amuri, Mauricio Claudio Resurun, mio conocí como Shong Mao. At noon every day, a radio broadcast gave the names of those who had died on the island during the last 24 hours. The name, nickname, time of death, place of the funeral service, and most importantly, the location of the wake was announced. No one we knew had died that day. In Curacao, that is very much a part of everyday life. It is one and the same. And it really makes you aware of how fragile and how precious life is. And it keeps a perspective that every day is a gift. The other part that is interesting is that the differentiation between the body, it's the body, if a body has an issue, it might not, your soul might not have an issue, but your body might. And it's a different perspective. It's just an interesting different perspective that, that became part of the language early on. So language can communicate more, it is more than just communication. It is also an insight on how the culture sees itself. It gives you a little window of how the people that speak that language view the world. Let's see. The next passage highlights a cultural dissidence left behind by the Dutch colonialism. Serena, the main character, is in Hollywood, and it's Christmas time, and she's decorating her Christmas tree by herself. And she thinks back of what the holidays are like in Curacao. Every December 5th, St. Nicholas sailed into the harbor on board a large ship, pretending he had come from Spain to celebrate his birthday with the children of Curacao. He'd stand on the deck dressed in an elegant bishop robe and mitre, his bishop crook in one hand and waving to the crowds with the other. He was surrounded by his many black helpers, all dressed in 16th century costumes, who were called Zwarte Pieten. His ship sailed carefully through the narrow harbor entrance, which was guarded on either side by a massive stone fort. The entrance of the channel was lined with brightly painted houses and shops that formed the center of Willemstad. St. Nicholas was welcomed by the Governor General of Curacao, along with thousands of singing children. It was a most impressive sight. The children sang Dutch St. Nicholas songs, which they had been practicing for weeks. St. Nicholas disembarks from his ship, accompanied by 8 or 10 Zwarte Pieten. He mounted a white horse, and as he rode through town, the Pieten danced and jumped around with their wooden switches. The Pieten made threatening gestures at the children, and then threw candies and marble-sized spice cookies from their burlap bags as they encouraged the children to sing along. St. Nicholas celebrations was a kind of day of the reckoning for children. If a child had behaved well throughout the previous year, there were gifts and treats. But if the child had not behaved well, St. Nicholas could command one of his helpers to put the child in a burlap bag and take him back to Spain for a year of harsh discipline. I always wished for St. Nicholas to be kind-hearted and forgiving. The only present I wanted from him were acceptance and understanding. The fear of being judged was overwhelming, and the promise of presents and the threat of punishment created a disturbing uncertainty that for me made the holiday a time of anxiety rather than joy. St. Nicholas was a 400-year-old Dutch tradition. In the Netherlands, Zwarte Pieten had to use large quantities of shoe polish to blacken their pale skin, something that is not necessary in Curacao. I liked the Zwarte Pieten, but I feared St. Nicholas. In spite of being disciplinarians, the Pieten were only following orders. To a Curacao native, however, the image of a white man commanding his black servants to carry out the wishes was a familiar old story from the slave days. Oma never celebrated St. Nicholas Day. She disliked it because she felt the celebration was hurtful for some, and that she felt celebration should never be painful for anyone. Mama, on the other hand, loved everything Dutch. She celebrated St. Nicholas with great enthusiasm. Now, sitting in front of our tree in our apartment in Hollywood, I miss the people, the smells, and the sounds of the holidays in Curacao. Now, she grows up, and obviously she finds out that it's all fake, and that it's a tradition. When at about 6 or 7, all the kids find out that this is not real, and the anxiety drops down, and you play along with the whole thing. And although from the Dutch perspective, even to this day, it's a fun, innocent celebration, and from that perspective, it is, because it's just good old fun. From the Curacao perspective, it was a whole different point of view. And perspective on cultures, when you look at it from a different culture, you shift perspective. And when you shift perspective, you see a whole new painting, a whole new picture, a whole new view on life. So that was a little leftover. And to this day, they still celebrate. And they've gone through all kinds of interesting changes of making the Piets whites and then the Sinterklaas black, or, they're trying to make it work. But it's still Sinterklaas, and in Holland it's still Sinterklaas. And it can be fun and silly, but can also be serious. The last piece that I'll be doing, Serena is 18. She's all grown up. And she gets a letter from, actually, she is looking for some aspirin and finds a letter. And the process of finding the letter brings on a whole new revelation to her. My head was throbbing. I needed aspirin, a sleeping pill, something, anything to make me feel better. Mama was not home yet. I looked in the lower cabinet of her nightstand. I opened the top drawer. Bunches of papers sprung out. I pulled them out and piled them on the bed. Still looking for an aspirin, I knew my mother usually kept near her. The handwriting on the light blue airmail envelope caught my eye. It looked like Oma's writing. The letter was addressed to me, from Elena Ferreira Garcia. Oma had sent me a letter. I touched the stamp. On the right-hand corner of the envelope, the portrait on the stamp of Queen Juliana was smiling. I imagined Oma licking the stamp and placing it in the corner of the envelope. I looked at the date. The letter had been mailed more than 2 years ago. I turned the envelope over. It had been opened. I held my breath as I delicately extracted the 2 translucent blue sheets from the envelope. Eagerly I began to read. Dear Serena, I miss you, and I realize we will not see each other again in this lifetime. There are so many things I still want to tell you. but the time to release my body is drawing closer. I will not be here for your 18th birthday, so this letter will have to speak for me. When it is your time to become independent, remember, your mother loves you, and that everything she did was done out of love. She never got over the pain of the rejection of Opa's family and the rejection she suffered in the war. She has spent her whole life battling to be accepted. Rejection has imprisoned her life. Her control and her expectations for her children have been her way of protecting all of you from that rejection. But by trying to save you from that pain, she has inflicted a greater pain, the pain of her not accepting you the way you are. She does not understand that by trying to spare you, she has hurt you. Nothing that I am telling you will ease the pain, but I hope it will bring understanding. You will have many feelings, but blaming your mother for the pain will only perpetuate the darkness. Rejection has been passed on for many generations. Celebrating your time together, being with each other in acceptance and understanding, is what brings about happiness, happy hearts. We're all interconnected. Happy birthday, Midushi. With all my love, Oma. Tears filled my eyes. I wished I could have been with Oma before she died. I looked in the envelope, but there was nothing. I leaned back on my mother's pillow, the tears spilling down my face. Oma had been the only person who had accepted me totally. I could talk to her about anything. I could hardly remember what that felt like. It had been so long since anyone had understood me completely. Even with Sandu, I always hid my part of myself. I walked to the dining table, took a pen and notebook out of my backpack and started to write. I wrote to Mama telling her how angry I was that she had not told me about Oma's letter. I wrote that I hated being accused of not loving her, of being ungrateful and uncaring. I told her that I was grateful and that I did love her and cared deeply, but I was frustrated because she could not see it. Tears streamed down my cheeks as I wrote furiously. I told her I knew she loved me, but the way she showed her love hurt me. I told her I wished I could talk to her and tell her how I felt. I asked if Hendrika, Wilja, Johan, or any of her children had done anything right, anything that had not hurt her. Had we done anything to make her proud? My pen finally slowed down. Out of breath and drained, I stopped and read through the letter. To my surprise, I found that I had said things I would not have said to my mother in Dutch. I realized that when I spoke Dutch to Mama, I was still a child, but in English, I could express myself as an adult. My English was finally good enough. I had learned the words I needed to describe my feelings. It was in English that I could understand and explain my life. There were many things that I had learned in Dutch, Spanish, and Papiamento. Yet it seemed that English was the language in which all things I had learned became clear. From now on, I'd speak English to Mama. I read the letter again and realized that each statement I had made, Mama could have made about me. I debated whether to give her the letter. I decided not to. Just writing it had been a revelation. I thought about how my whole life revolved around Mama and the apprehension I felt while living with her. I didn't really know who I was without her. I felt suffocated and wanted some fresh air. When I found out that when you learn different language at different ages, you learn the language of that particular age. And I had, for myself, later on in life, this is Serena, but I had, for myself, gone back to Spain and to the Netherlands to learn proper grown-up Spanish and Dutch. And so in the novel, what I did was slightly different. I showed that she still stayed a child. So when you, when you learn the language as a child, you learn it from sensing it more. It's a more sensory integration experience, I found. And that actually is different than learning it from an adult with all the grammar and all the proper. And so that was an interesting part, in which I tried to illustrate in this piece. So that's what the book is about.